Hello and welcome to the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. We bring you interviews from people who have conquered the trickiest of health challenges using the functional diagnostic nutrition philosophy and similar healing modalities. You're going to hear from experts who have been through the ringer with their health issues and yet managed to come out on the other side. You can always visit us at functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com, but for now, here is today's episode. All right, hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. My name is Evan Transu, aka Detective Ev, and I will be your host for today's show, episode number 431 of the Health Detective Podcast. So much great news to share with you guys, so I'm going to kind of rapid fire this, so stay with me here. In just a few days, I will be moving, and my wife and I are taking like kind of a month to go back to the Northeast, which is one of our favorite places in summer. But then we are heading down to Austin, Texas. So if you are down there, please get connected with me. I'm doing a bunch of health meetups and events in our apartment building. So we will be hosting those as soon as we get down there. And we'd love to meet other FDNs, FDN trainees, or people who just listen to the podcast. That's fine as well. But the reason I'm mentioning Austin is because we will start in-person podcasting there. We're still going to be doing our live stuff just like we're doing right now, but about once a month with probably some big name in the industry, we will be sitting down in person about as great a video and audio quality as you could possibly imagine. I'm looking to upgrade this setup here too for the new apartment, but we'll be doing in-person stuff. I'm seeing if we're going to have the ability to live stream from those facilities. It's very likely that we will be able to, but if not, we'll let you guys know. And basically we'd have one video release a month that's going to be on the video side of our YouTube channel. So we are looking forward to that. Another announcement really quick is if you guys like nerding out with us on these podcasts and you're looking for something a little bit more, maybe your Saturdays are now filled with waking up super early because you went to bed at 9 p.m. on Friday and you had to catch your morning sunlight, right? So you're the least exciting person in your family. Well, you don't have to be. You can head over to Health Space Unmasked with us. That's actually this Saturday, August 2nd at 11:30 Eastern, 8:30 Pacific. This is something that Reed and the crew have been doing for years now at FDN. We end up doing it about 11 times per year on the first Saturday of each month. Usually December is one that we skip. And this one is with a fan favorite of the podcast, Dr. Lori Rose. So you can go check this out and register. It's completely free at fdntraining.com/HSU live. That's fdntraining.com/HSU, like Health Space Unmasked live. And we're going to be talking about making herbal medicine accessible, how to make herbal medicine in your own kitchen. I could be wrong, but knowing her and knowing this description that I have of what's going to happen on Saturday, Dr. Lori usually literally does this live. So she has, she's got the jars out, she's got the herbs out, she's making stuff right in front of you. So this would be one where I'd have your mason jars ready, have the herbs ready. It's not my thing. I fully respect and love it. But apparently this is something that the ladies love because when she came on a webinar last time, we had 40 people doing this with her just live. And that doesn't count all the other people that were on. So fdntraining.com/HSU live. We'd love to see you there. Okay. And now for our guest today, I was telling her beforehand, this is always a topic that does super well on the podcast. I wish it didn't, but it's something that's very relevant to people. So as long as it's relevant, we're going to keep sharing this message. And I'm really excited to hear her story. So Olivia is an FDN and functional hormone specialist who struggled with unknown infertility while navigating a stressful career. Getting no help from conventional medicine for well over a year led her to discover the power of a functional approach, and it completely changed her perspective on fertility. Instead of guessing, she turned to focusing on foundational aspects of health that are often ignored in the conventional setting. Now, this is really crazy. Once she addressed her health from a root cause perspective, dialing in on gut health and nervous system regulation, she was pregnant within 12 weeks. This led her to completely switch her career, I don't blame you, diving into the world of cutting-edge lab testing and a root cause approach to optimize health for conception. She now dedicates her work to helping women uncover the hidden factors affecting their fertility, empowering them with science-backed strategies to restore balance, optimize hormones, and support their chances of conceiving naturally. Olivia, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and for that very nice introduction.
Yes. Well, it's super impressive. And again, I don't think people understand that this stuff's possible. So I'll always say beforehand, before we get fully started today, it is very probable, just because of the title, that this is going to be someone's first podcast with us. And what I mean by that is they were searching for this type of stuff, looking for answers, probably similar to how you were at one point, and they find this as their first podcast. So welcome. FDN's a program that trains people like myself and Olivia. I don't own the program by any means. That'd be kind of cool, but I do not. That's Reed Davis, our founder. And we work with a variety of people, but so many of particularly the women who have gone through FDN find this niche to serve in the infertility and fertility space. And I'm always amazed by these stories. These pretty much never get old, because it's kind of a beautiful thing to be able to figure out and then go help others with. So with that stated and that disclaimer put out, Olivia, I want to ask, what did your health symptoms look like and when did they begin? And I'm only asking that under the assumption that you might have had some stuff going on before dealing with this infertility stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that honestly, that probably accounts for almost all of the FDNs, out there, that it always starts from such a personal place, right? You grow up suffering with something, you dig so hard and, like so deep to try and find the answers, and then we end up here. So it honestly, my hormonal imbalances and symptoms all started at puberty. I always had very painful periods as a teenager. I would have to stay home from school, balled up on the couch in tears. As I got into my mid-teens, they weren't so bad, but when I was about 14 onwards, I had terrible hormonal acne. I struggled with eczema my whole life as well. I struggled with a lot of anxiety throughout high school and college. To be totally transparent, I moved out of my childhood home at the age of 16. So I had to grow up very extremely fast. And this was very conflicting for my nervous system. I had to do a lot of work on nervous system to even balance out my hormones once I figured out what was going on with them. As a child, my nervous system really wanted safety and nurturing as they do. But my reality didn't really feel that way. So, I did not have a terrible childhood. I'm still very close to my parents. But my circumstances were better if I had moved out on my own at that point. I really created this life for myself at 16 where I relied heavily on my studies and work. I really replaced my lack of emotional awareness and safety with work. And as I graduated college, I had fell headfirst into a career which I loved, but it was very all-consuming for me. So, the point to all of this, really, I'm going to digress a little bit, but I never realized the connection between nervous system regulation and gut health to hormonal health, let alone, all the skin issues that I dealt with as a youth as well. This is all connected, and it's such an amazing realization once you come to seeing how connected everything is. And, it's not all so separate in the way that you are, that's made out to be, how I didn't realize at the time either how easy it was to stay on this path of burnout, like going towards burnout in my career, because my career has always been so important to me. But I was really sacrificing my health for it. And I never really put into perspective how serious my hormonal imbalances were until my husband and I were trying to start a family in early 2020. So at that point, I was, burning out in my career without realizing it. And after dedicating most of my life, day in and day out to the profession that I was in, I was, on edge constantly. My cycles were irregular. My skin was still a disaster. And, my mid-20s, I'm struggling to start a family and get pregnant. So that's really where, things kind of started to take a turn for me.
I like that you are bringing into this not only just the physical health symptoms, but some of the stressful stuff that was going on in this career orientation, because I think this is a theme that we're seeing so much in today's world. And obviously you see it mentioned online for reasons that have nothing to do with health, but I do think it affects people. I think that there is an added layer of stress now that affects both males and females in ways that people are not acknowledging. Because newsflash, any half decent dude out there, and I'm always I'm not like a male apologist here, but I feel so terrible because there's like 5% of males that are just pieces of crap that do awful things and then give the rest of the males a bad name. 95% of males we are wired in such a way that there is nothing more that we'd love to do than find a woman that we love and be able to care for her and protect her in any way possible to the degree that she wants, not in some sexist way, right? Like the opposite, because we value this person so much that that's how we want to provide value to her. And people are not able to do that anymore. Things are so expensive. You're always comparing yourself online. Both people now have to get involved, typically speaking, in careers just to compete in today's world. And it's really sad to see. My business partner and I, Ryan Monahan, were just together in Colorado, and he got this huge sale that came in, Olivia. It was like, in excess of $7,000 or $8,000 for his personal business. And he had these guys that were painting at his house. And we were driving away in the morning to go eat our stupid paleo breakfast at some overpriced cafe near his house. And we just sat there for a moment and we realized, how lucky are we that these people are working their butts off out there. It's 95 degrees. They're doing the painting at the house in Denver, Colorado. And we're out here driving to get some overpriced gluten-free stuff working online, right? But that's the reality. These people are working their butts off, and you still need two people in the home typically making money. So I think some of this is probably, the stress of it is probably not natural. The level to which we have to work is probably not natural. And I do think it's affecting everyone. So it's cool to me that you bring that up as part of your health story. I think that's super relevant. Now, the other symptoms at the time in your childhood and teenage years, the acne, stuff that seems normal enough. Did you even look at that as some type of symptom, some warning sign of deeper issues, or was that just normal stuff that any teenager has?
I mean, I feel like I can speak for probably almost all teenagers. I think the awareness is growing more now, but yeah, I mean, like you think about teenagehood and you automatically think about acne and skin problems, right? And even like moodiness, right? Like we think of these things that is just part of growing up and being a teenager, and it's just some kind of like hurdle that you have to get past. But then you look around you as a teenager and you're like, well, why doesn't everyone have as bad of skin as me? And it doesn't hit everybody the same way, of course, bio individuality. But no, I did not realize at that time what was, really kind of like bubbling under the surface, causing all of these external symptoms. I really did not have that awareness. And when I found that awareness, it was quite incredible.
And that's what I'm getting at, because I mean, we're going to dive more into your story, but just reading the timeline, I'm like, all right, basically a year of dealing with the infertility stuff and then finding these things and switching stuff around. You strike me as someone who's incredibly smart, just how fast you adapted to all these things, because typically they're multi-year processes for people. So let's continue with the story here. At what point, not to be too direct with my questioning, sorry, but in what point in trying with your husband did you realize that infertility is an issue? Because I've never tried to have a kid yet with my wife, but I would imagine if it didn't work in 2 or 3 months, I wouldn't say like everything's not working. At what point do you actually realize something's not working properly?
Yeah. So, I mean, all in all, we were trying to get pregnant for over a year. But it was not until it was about 10 to 11 months of trying to conceive that I started to ask some more questions, because I mean, at the time I was in my mid-20s, I considered myself, quote unquote healthy, but nothing was really happening for us. Right. So I, started going to my conventional doctor, asking some questions, and unfortunately, at that point, he had refused to run any hormone blood work on me or look into anything at all, which, unfortunately is a lot more common than you would hope it to be. Yeah, so that's kind of what really kickstarted me asking some other questions and trying to look outside of the box from, what conventional medicine was offering me, which was at this point nothing. So yeah, that's when I really started getting into things, because I started to feel like something was really wrong, I would say, even a little bit before that, I was kind of like looking into things a bit in terms of like my skin, not so much the fertility aspect at that point, because I wasn't trying to conceive at that point. At the end of the day, I would look at myself and I would say, well, you know what? I'm pretty healthy. I exercise. I eat 3 meals a day, for the most part. I used to skip breakfast a lot. But I wasn't eating out at fast food restaurants every single day like some other people was. There's this standard, of what people see as healthy. And when you really get into what health really is and what it means, and like you really kind of like dig into things, like you really come to this recognition was like, wow, that really actually wasn't healthy. But there's this blanket standard that we are told and taught growing up of, like it's okay to do this or it's okay to do that. And I mean, I'm not for extremes. And I say this to my clients all the time. I am not an extremist. We still need to live a full, happy life and experience different things and, eat the damn cookie, you know what I mean? But, at the same time, it's like, we are so ingrained in us that, with the commercials of fast food that we see all day and, like all the different gadgets out there, you want to be on a screen all day, every day. And it's like, that's really so detrimental to your health and your hormones. So yeah, sorry. I feel like I kind of turned this question around a little bit, but, so going back to, I guess, when we were trying to conceive, I had actually turned to a hormone coach. At the time, she's actually now an FDN as well. But that's where my passion really started to grow. Again, I was not getting answers through conventional medicine. So I had found her and I started working with her right away. I was really excited to have a different avenue to look down. And something really that caught my attention was the fact that if a couple is not having success in trying to conceive within about 3 to 4 months, that is the time that you should start to be asking questions. Not what all the other, like health professionals out there are saying, or most of them anyways, that you have to wait until it's been a year before you start investigating. That is not the case. You are wasting precious time. And that's something that I wish I knew so much sooner, was that, before we hit that 6-month mark, that's when we should have started asking questions, looking into things, looking for some, validation and some answers, and not waiting so long. And it really, really amazed me when I started working on this more functional approach and holistic approach. With just small tweaks in nutrition, nervous system regulation, like we call it like our DRESS protocol, like, what these tiny little tweaks can do and, really change your life. And, also coming to the recognition that realizing that my success in a career and, having good health could coexist. Because that was something that I think a lot of people don't think that they can have both, live the best of both worlds, have a thriving career and be in your career, but also not be a nervous wreck and stressed out all the time and overworking yourself, like they're so blended, those two things. But they can coexist. I just really had to make that my reality by being more aware, very, very intentional, and not letting other people, depict my ability and what I was able to do, based on the standard that's given to us.
Sure. And then, yeah, so just to reiterate that, because I was going to ask you, because somehow I don't know as many podcasts as we've done that have had like a somewhat similar topic. I don't know that we've ever put a number on that. So not medical advice, but your opinion is that within 3 to 4 months, if you've been trying, that's probably the time frame to start saying, hey, something's going on here. Whereas conventional medicine, the standard's around 1 year.
Yes.
Wow. It is kind of insane. And I, by the way, guys, I'm not saying this in any bad way. I'm saying this as someone who does not have kids, and full transparency, doesn't actually have a plan to have kids. But from a biological perspective, just purely biological, we're basically here to do two things, right? I'm supposed to survive as long as possible, and ideally I'm supposed to reproduce. So if we're having trouble doing that, you'd think that would be like an obvious red flag. Like that should be something that's pretty easy for our bodies to do. I mean, by the way, we might get into this today, we might not. This is not just a woman thing by any means. I hope people understand that. There's plenty of things that are happening to males as a result of today's world that's making us infertile in our own ways. So this is definitely, it takes two to tango, and both should probably be looked at in their own respective ways. But it is kind of crazy, I guess, looking at that on paper, to think that people would go a year or 2 years and think that we can't do one of the most natural things that could possibly happen with the human body. So kind of good point and good perspective. And I think it will give people back a lot of time if they are listening to this right now, kind of having that hint in their mind, like, is something going on? 3 to 4 months is a way better standard than 1 year, or again, even 2 years. I've heard some people say to me on this podcast before they realized, maybe I should go do something about this. I know it's not the main point of the day. I have to ask one more thing about just the mindset around all this, because I'm still so impressed how you got into this so early, because normally it takes so much longer. Even working with a hormone specialist, I get that you were looking into stuff for the acne side, but what was the thing that made you so open to an unconventional route? Because Olivia, surely you have to know, I mean, people are not as open as you seem to be with this type of stuff. Some people will never engage in these types of things. So what allowed you to be open-minded enough to go work with a hormone specialist?
Honestly, I think out of pure, I don't want to say pure desperation, but I was very desperate. My husband and I were very desperate to start a family. We had waited to start trying to conceive until we knew, like, we are ready to be parents. And by then it's like, well, I want to be a parent, like, I don't want to wait, for this to happen. So it's like, after a year, you're like, well, I wanted to have a baby in my arms, like, 3-4 months ago. Like, why is this taking so long? And I'm sure, if there are people listening to this podcast that are in the thick of struggling to conceive, they can relate to that. Like, how much, like, desperation comes to the surface when you so badly want to be a parent, and when it's not happening for you month after month. There's so much emotion that comes in with this. So, I mean, I felt pretty aligned to the functional approach and the holistic approach pretty early on. It did not take me long to, to really, like, change my perception on how I was living my life. I mean, I was already, like, in sort of, like, had my feet wet in the holistic kind of mindset, because, like, I knew how important, movement and exercise was. Like, I did that regularly. Like, I took my vitamins. You grow up taking your Flintstone vitamins, that you need vitamins and minerals. It's so funny, because it's like, wow, it's not a great choice, but it's fine. My parents didn't know any better. But yeah, I would say that is really what it was just, being so desperate to be a parent, and really, really wanting answers, and not being able to get those answers, where I was looking for them, and just getting that blatant answer of, no, I'm not going to run any labs on you. We need to wait until over a year. And then the kicker was, my doctor had, after refusing to run those labs, had said, we need to wait until it's been over a year, and then I'll refer you to a fertility clinic where fertility treatments can be discussed with you. And that just seemed so foreign and, like, unneeded, like, for me then, because it's like, well, how do we even know that I need fertility treatments? Like, can we not look at some other things, first? Like, and it was just, the topic was brought up so quickly, which can be very confusing to a couple. Like, you go into a doctor's office, or you call and try and make an appointment, and you're not given any answers, and then it's just like, well, yeah, you might need fertility treatment, and it's just like, it's so confusing.
Yeah, and I hate that it's this way, but again, this is one of the best niches an FDN can get into, not only because you're literally helping bring in the miracle of life to this world. I think that's a pretty noble cause. But number two, just purely practically speaking, IVF and all that stuff, that's not cheap. And it is actually way objectively cheaper to get yourself healthy, and not to mention just what an investment for the long term, because you'll save yourself a bunch of other problems. Whereas, like, some of these other issues, can kind of be covered by certain healthcare stuff. They can get you on medications for a while, and it's easy enough to justify in your head, well, I could stay on the system here because I don't want to buy all these labs or whatever. This one's pretty black and white. So I love them getting to hear these stories of people having success. And in your case, for those that tuned in a little bit late, you did have success, which is amazing. So within 12 weeks, in your bio, it said, of working with this person, things started turning around. I mean, you guys had to be on cloud nine, not only because, of course, you're happy that you got what you wanted, but it has to leave you in awe to see it actually works. Because it's one thing when you're studying this stuff and you're hearing it almost in theory, like, oh, it worked for someone else, or I get why this would work. But then to experience that had to be an incredible experience.
It was. I mean, we were completely over the moon about it. And like, you're always going to be a little bit skeptical trying something new, right? And thinking, well, this is seems so simple. It's not always easy, but these are fairly simple, like primal things that we're working on and digging into here. But they really do work. And something that you just, when you were talking about IUI and IVF, and how like so many people are recommended these treatments, yes, they may get you pregnant, but after you're pregnant, and after in your postpartum season, and your hormones are going to try and start regulating again, all of your symptoms from your cycles and your PMS and your hormonal acne, and all of these symptoms that you were struggling with before, you're going to be struggling with them again. So instead of jumping into investing into something like multiple rounds of IUI, because IUI, the success rates for IUI are very low. They're about 10%. So, I mean, most couples need multiple rounds of IUI in order to get pregnant, which, I mean, I'm in Canada, and here in Canada, you're spending about $7,000 for a round of IVF or of IUI. For IVF, that's closer to 20,000, higher sometimes. So, and this is Canadian dollars, but, I mean, investing in yourself and investing in your health is not only going to be beneficial for you in the short term, with getting pregnant and feeling healthier and feeling better, but it's also going to be helping you for the rest of your life. So before jumping into these investments, I think the more important question is, why am I not investing in myself in the long term? And you may still need IUI or IVF. It's very well possible. And we are very, very lucky and fortunate to have these options available. But unfortunately, they are grossly over-recommended. And there are, I'm going to go ahead and assume hundreds of thousands of couples in the world that probably could have gotten pregnant on their own with the right steps, and, like looking in, like on more of that foundational level, rather than just going with what was recommended and jumping right into fertility treatments right off the hop.
I like that you mentioned too that some people might still need these treatments. I feel like you make it very obvious. You just have such a nice tone about you, and you've been through this yourself. I've said this wrong though before on the show. That's why I keep putting these disclaimers on. I never mean any of this in like a demeaning way to people when I say, oh, well, naturally we should be able to do this. Like, some people assume that means, oh, I must be broken or something wrong with me. It's not what I'm saying at all. I'm actually trying to open your mind to the idea of that logically we should be able to do this fairly easily. And all these clinics have had to open up over the past several decades, when before, some people had 10 kids in their family and that was just like the norm. We have to ask, what is going on here? What is happening? And so there's nothing wrong if you still do need this eventually. That's all good. Again, it's a blessing that we do have it. But to your point, Olivia, there's so many people that are not getting all the information and do not realize that they could actually make a really long-term investment in their health for a fraction of the cost, still get pregnant, and literally get their health better overall. I mean, what more can you ask for really with that?
Absolutely.
So let's get into the specifics and the how. I know this is what people are really waiting for here. And if you guys have any questions for Olivia, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'm happy to ask them. I do see some of you on, but I know this is also like a personal thing. So I was kind of debating back and forth whether or not people would want to ask in this type of forum, but please feel free to on our YouTube or Facebook. We'd love to get your questions answered. With that said, though, when you worked with this hormone specialist, what specifically were you doing? What were the things that you believe contributed most to your health? We're not saying that this is going to be the same for everyone. This is why we do testing as FDNs. But for you, what were some of the major changes that you made that you believe contributed to successful pregnancy?
Yeah, so I mean, it's funny. So the hormone coach that I worked with when I first started in all of this, she was not an FDN at the time, so I didn't even actually run labs. This was all solely on diet and lifestyle. So I mean that even just more so goes to show you like how much can change just by such simple factors, such as nutrition and lifestyle. So, I mean, for me, a lot of it was really dialing in good nutrition, which, I mean, again, I had thought that I was pretty healthy in the way in which I ate. But, you know, I didn't realize how much, like vegetables and fruits and whole foods like that you should be eating. Like everybody kind of has like an idea. You get your food triangle out that you're, you learned like the principles of what to eat, and it's like that's so off. But yeah, really just dialing in like intentional nutrition, working on like detoxification was a huge thing for me. So, I did a lot of like lymphatic work. I did a lot of like oil pulling, working on like my oral microbiome. That's a whole nother topic on its own. But yeah, I would say, and nervous system regulation was a huge, like a transition for me. Having that history of, anxiety and a lot of like suppressed emotions. And, I truly believe that has so much to do with hormonal health and, the ability to, to conceive and having your mind and body truly feel safe to carry another life, and so I do think that was a massive proponent to me becoming pregnant. So not only the nutritional aspect, really dialing in proper nutrition with guidance, not just going online and, what should I eat to get pregnant? Because it's so bio-individual. And, this all went back to of like symptoms that I was experiencing at the time. Food really is medicine. So, certain types of food can really help with certain symptoms for different reasons. This is why it's so bio-individual. And working on blood sugar regulation was huge for me as well. I was someone that also really struggled with low blood sugar. And again, like it's always going to come back to safety. Like, does my body feel safe enough to conceive? And at the time, it didn't.
I love that you use that wording, because I think that proves this point that we were talking about before. Because someone might listen and say, well, wait, how the heck could someone have an issue for, at least a year, possibly over years for many of the people that come on this podcast. And then I've heard the same thing every time, Olivia, is that they end up getting pregnant relatively quickly compared to how long they were having an issue. And so someone might say, how is that even possible? Well, again, it goes back to this idea that this is natural. This is something that your body kind of wants to do. And so the second that it feels like it can, it's probably going to. But if it doesn't feel safe, because it's smart, it knows that, especially for a woman, it's a very risky thing. You're going to be carrying this baby for 9 months. And unfortunately, this would be pretty cool, but they don't pop out with 401ks, jobs, and ready to take care of themselves, right? They have to be taken care of for many years after that. I forget what that term is, but human beings are the mammal with like the longest period of time from the time the baby's born to the time it can actually be, safe on its own. You think about that with other mammals, it's like, it's a matter of months to maybe a year or two. But with us, like, you got to take care of us for many years before we're ready to go do anything on our own. So of course your body's not going to allow you to do that if it feels unsafe. So before we get into then your progression into becoming an FDN in the lab side, I do think it's worth spending some more time on the nervous system regulation, because you've mentioned this several times. It seems very important in your journey. And so when you say regulating the nervous system, I know that probably people need to be coached through these types of things, but what are some of the specifics that actually do that? Because this is a topic that does come up a lot for a variety of reasons, not just infertility. And I'm sure everyone would like a regulated nervous system. But if they're wondering, okay, I get that I should be doing that, what does that actually look like? What do I have to do to achieve that? What are some of the favorite techniques of yours?
Yeah. So when I first started into focusing into nervous system regulation, I started with, I did a lot of research into the vagus nerve. So vagal toning, strengthening your vagus nerve, breath work was something that was just very easy. I feel like breath work is probably one of the easiest stepping stones into nervous system regulation. Everybody can do it. It doesn't take any expensive tools or anything like that. And I really do think that it's underrated. when you talk to somebody that may not be, you know, in the space, or has never considered, you know, like nervous system and the importance of it, you know, you talk about breath work and they're like, nah, you know, I think it seems like it's too easy, like it's too good to be true. It's too easy. But breath work was really like opened the door to me, to like kind of like shifting into that parasympathetic state, like your rest and digest state, and then learning what that feels like, you know, because it's also something where like someone that has been in a chronic fight or flight state, which is where I was, I think you kind of lose what a rest and digest actually feels like, you know, and like you get so used to the chaos and, you know, being so alert all the time, that you have to kind of relearn how to almost be bored, you know, and like get yourself to actually being calm and like focusing on like being mindful and like listening to your body, asking yourself how you're feeling, almost being a little bit selfish, you know. And I feel like women, especially, you know, we are a lot of the time, like it just comes with the territory being a caregiver, you know, whether that be to your family, your friends, you know, and you almost lose yourself in that process. Especially women that are very career driven, you know, and they really lose that like feminine aspect of themselves and taking care of themselves. And that doesn't just mean, you know, going and get your hair and nails done. You know, I understand self-care can get very, can be a very vague topic, but, yeah, I would say like breath work, just going back again, digressing here, but going back to your question, breath work was a really big proponent when I first started, and like working on vagus nerve. So gargling, you know, just gargling water, that's an exercise for activating your vagus nerve. It's something that's so simple. All you need is water, you know, it really does not have to be complicated.
Awesome. Yeah, and of course they can work with you or reach out to you if they'd like to learn more about that specifically. We'll shout out in about 10, 15 minutes where you guys can find Olivia. If you're on the audio, you already can just find it in the show notes. But okay, moving on then a little bit, and I can't believe how much these are ones that I almost wish were an hour and a half long, because I feel like it takes me full 30 minutes just to get through the story side. So getting into more specifics, you eventually decide that you want to become an FDN. I think it's really cool that the specialist that you worked with originally also became an FDN. That's absolutely amazing. So when you were going through the course, did you find anything on the labs that was particularly of interest for you in terms of like a healing opportunity or something to work on with your health? And the reason I ask this, for those that don't know, is we do include our foundational labs in the cost of tuition. You're actually required to run these on yourself while you go through the course. It's part of the curriculum. We want to see what's going on. You're going to be your own first client. But the other reason that I'm asking here, Olivia, is because it sounds like you went through FDN by the time that you were already having success with things. And yet I guarantee there's probably still stuff that you could have worked on. So it just shows how sick people really are and why we're dealing with these issues. So what did you find on the labs when you ran them at FDN?
Yeah, exactly. It's so interesting because, I mean, obviously by this time I had already become pregnant. So this was newly into my postpartum period. I had already worked with this hormone coach and a naturopath, and I still found a whole slew of imbalances, you know. So I was very much cortisol dominant still at the time. And I mean, really unsurprising, I guess, being in this postpartum period, you know, you're not sleeping. And so my circadian rhythm was definitely off. I was kind of back in that chronic fight or flight response. All of my sex hormones were tanked. So, and I mean, I was enough into my postpartum period where my hormones should have been back within normal range, you know, as pre-pregnancy. But all of my sex hormones were tanked. I had about half of the ideal level of progesterone, which for those of you don't know is our progestation hormone. My testosterone levels were lower than my overseeing practitioner had ever seen them. So, I mean, yeah, I was, and again, like kind of just going back to the nervous system, like if your body does not feel safe and your adrenals are overworked, your body is not going to be prioritizing making hormones like sex hormones. So it was really, really reflecting. My gut was a mess. Every single marker on my metabolic panel and mucosal barrier assessment were in the red, all except for diamine oxidase, which that was 4 times lower than where it should have been. So, I mean, leaky gut was definitely a big issue. My immune system was exhausted. Yeah. So, I mean, definitely there was a lot of red flags, even after doing some of this preliminary work.
Well, and that's what's nuts in the picture I'm trying to paint for people is like, so you went through FDN, you already got pregnant, you already had dealt with an infertility thing that got better. It's like, what the heck did Olivia's labs look like, in the beginning of that year of infertility, right? And it probably was longer if you had tried to start earlier, but you
I'm
know what
sure
I
it
mean?
was
It's
so
like
much worse.
those labs had to be worse. And so, again, the body wants to do this, folks. It's just that we are up against every nasty thing that you could be up against in today's world. So, looking back now, I'm assuming that you probably, if like knowing what you know, would have started with the labs, would have started with an FDN, which is probably why you became one. So, when you work with clients now, what can they expect if they were to reach out to you, or rather work with you? What labs are we going to run through? Do you use the foundationals, or is it a mix of some other things? And that's totally fine if so. I'd love to know how you personally work, and then what other things can they expect from working with you?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have strayed a little bit from the foundational labs. I really found a love for a full like Dutch Plus panel. I think that, having a really good visualization of our sex hormones and the metabolization is very, very important. And minerals as well. I've really, really come to love having a visual of our mineral status through hair tissue. The HTMA. So typically, those are 2 labs that I really love, along with the GI map, just because gut inflammation, gut infections, parasites, like parasites are very common, very, very common, more so than like everyone that I talk to that's not in this space is always so surprised when I talk about, parasites with them and grossed out. But yeah, those 3, the Dutch, the GI map, the HTMA, those are, I would say, my favorite labs. We always find something, really that ends up being very key in their transitional journey, when I'm working with women. But yeah, typically, we always do like a full comprehensive intake. Every woman is different. Everyone's journey is different. And I think that's also what's so important is that you don't want to have this cookie cutter approach, like we really have to take in bio individuality, what you're struggling with. Some women that come to me, they know, like they have had some workup done and all of their labs come back quote unquote normal. And, they may have even a male factor involved, which that's a whole other conversation we don't have time for today. Even when we run labs on them, we always find something to improve. They end up feeling so much better, after we work on these things, because it's so much more than surface level labs. And blood work is really great. I love when clients come to me and they have had blood work, run, or they get blood work done. It's a really great piece of the puzzle, but it's so important to have these more foundational labs where we're looking at, what your minerals are like, what's your nutrient status, how is your liver, how is your body detoxifying, do you have a really heavy burden, what's your gut inflammation like. It's so great to have these really baseline factors to consider, because that's what you build everything off of, right?
I know that we don't have time to fully talk about it today. It's totally okay, but just honestly, out of respect, I think there's some things in society that are a little bit of nonsense right now. And then I think there's some things where, like, no, we need to represent both sexes here properly. And I do not think males are brought up enough in the conversation around the infertility thing. I think people do look at it as a woman problem, which is true that it can be a woman problem, but it's not even close to complete. Male sperm counts down. There's a bunch of issues there. And God knows most males don't take any care of their health until we have to. So with that said, is there just even somewhere we can steer people in the right direction? Maybe that's something they can reach out to you about. And is that a yes? Or would there be somewhere else that they can go if they're interested in making sure that the male gets some help here too?
I've worked with men on their fertility as well. We have to consider the male, part of the equation, right? This is literally 50% of the equation. And that's something that, is also really needs to be talked about, is that women always take on such heavy responsibility when it comes to getting pregnant. and a lot of women automatically assume that it's them, that it's their bodies. And, male factor isn't even considered. There's been couples that have tried for over a decade only looking at the female portion of things, coming to realize, like many, many years later, that there was a male factor involved that whole time. And, they could have saved so many years of heartache, if they had just looked into this piece of the puzzle. So yes, I absolutely do, work with men as well. I have mostly women, I would say that, that come to me. I think that's just, they may feel more open to that, and that's fair. But yeah, the male counterpart absolutely has to be considered.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, and I'm glad to know that they could reach out to you for that. It's just you might as well look at both. Different issues you're going to see in both, but you have to look at both for something like this, in my opinion. So, all right, kind of going back to the labs here. I'm curious about maybe labs of your clients, and I know that these are personal things. So, just to the degree that you're able to share, I'd love to hear some type of story about someone or a couple maybe that worked with you and the success that they were able to have. And Olivia, even if you want, I don't want to get too specific with my question. You could just pick another one if it works better. But in your case, it is beautiful to hear that it took 12 weeks and things got better. But you've also mentioned some cases where people might end up needing to do an IVF or something similar. So even if you want to give a painfully realistic story where it's like, hey, we did work on this for a while, things got better, but we might have had to do something else. I'd just like to know a story that kind of paints a different picture than maybe just the one that we shared today, but still is otherwise a success story for those out there that are worried right now.
Yeah. Did you want me to go into, like a success story with a client, or did you want me to go into the lab?
Yeah, I guess I asked you two questions, didn't I? I have a tendency to do that. And I'm just hoping that I'm like, maybe she'll run with it. So let's start with the success story side and just talk about another one, just to show people that this is not just for individuals like us who end up wanting to go through courses and make this their entire career and existence. This can work for other people too. So just a cool success story.
Yeah, sure. So actually, very early on into becoming an FDN, I had taken on a client that had been trying to conceive with her husband, and they were getting very discouraged. The period kept coming, nothing was happening. She was dealing with a lot of depression, anxiety. She had also had a history of gastric bypass surgery, which definitely complicates things for people that don't know when it comes to nutrient absorption. We actually, with her, I had only suggested to her to start with one lab because finances were a big concern. So we had actually even just started with the HTMA, which is a fairly inexpensive test. So it was a really great thing to start off with. Again, she had that big history of, the gastric bypass, was not absorbing nutrients very well. So we had found quite a lot of imbalances in terms of, even just stress. There's certain markers on the HTMA that reflect highly with adrenal stress. We, basically just kind of made up her protocol based on those findings, working a lot on nervous system regulation, working a lot on, food, like what foods that she should be prioritizing with these gastric surgeries. She could only eat a tiny amount of food at a time. So, you're supposed to be getting in, X amount of calories and nutrients in a day, especially when you're trying to get pregnant, you need to be able to be meeting some nutrient requirements. And she just simply wasn't able to do that. So by, working together and just being really intentional with, what she was putting into her body, and working very heavily on the nervous system end of things, she actually ended up getting pregnant within, I think it was about 4 months. So, this is, not a story that was filled with a lot of labs. But I think that's kind of the point, is that it doesn't always have to be, you can really start with something very simple and foundational. Not everybody has, the funds to invest in a lot of labs, and that's okay. But I think when you have the direction to really be intentional on what truly matters, with what's within your capacity, that can make all the difference.
Do you have the ability to go several minutes over? Just not like 20, but just a few minutes over?
Yeah, that's okay.
Awesome. All right, thanks. I'd be mad at myself if I didn't get to some of these questions. I normally don't ever have to go over, but these conversations around this stuff's too important. There's too many things to hit on. So one, I want to say that's amazing, and it just goes to show again, if we can do all the labs, awesome. But that's like two stories now, yours and hers, where, well, you didn't use any labs at the time, and her totally inexpensive lab, relatively easy changes as a result. So I just think that's amazing. I did want to get to one audience question here. I normally wouldn't take the first one so late and go figure it's a guy, but it's Russ. I know Russ. He's a good guy. He's an FDN in training himself. And so I'll throw his in here. He said, what HTMA pattern do you see that would be an alarm bell related to pregnancy issues for men and women? So are there things that are you typically seeing them in one pattern more often than not on the HTMA? Good question.
Yeah, I would say probably the most predominant pattern that I see with men or women that are struggling is a stress pattern. So because again, stress has so much to do with hormone production, hormone balancing, feeling safe enough to reproduce. So, usually this is going to be in what we call like the 3 or 4 lows, where 3 or 4 of your main macro minerals, your calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium, are all very depleted. So you're in this very depleted state. And, as I'm sure anyone can imagine, when you are in a very depleted state, you have a pretty empty cup, and your body is not going to be able to prioritize reproducing at that point because it's more worried about survival and keeping you safe. And and that's really goes hand in hand with like this burnout pattern. So many people are burned out and they really need that support to learn how to properly replete themselves to get up to this, back up to this baseline level in order to start building up from there. I would say that's probably the most common pattern that I can really point out without going into all individual minerals.
Doris, thank you. And thanks, Russ. I have one last question for you before we shout out where people can find you and stuff like that, and then the signature question. So I guess it's just the last of the normal questions. I would just, again, I'd be mad if I didn't ask you this today because it's an important part of your story, I think, and you mentioned it as one of the things you wanted to discuss. This career side, right, mixed with this and being a type A person and all that. It sounds like you weren't giving any of that up, right? In fact, you actually started a whole business around this stuff, which is the most type A thing that you could possibly do. And I will say, huge difference. I don't think people understand this until they do it. But when you are doing work that you love, man, your capacity to work, you can't comprehend it until you live it, because there is so much stress that comes from driving into a place or clocking into a place that we hate or really resent. So that adds extra stress, right? So it feels like every hour is dragging on, but when you're doing stuff you love, you can do a lot more hours. But even so, a business is still stressful. It's a new endeavor for you. It doesn't sound like you owned your own business before. So what's your word of advice to the women out there that do love this career side? They don't want to lose that part of their identity, and they shouldn't. It's 2025. Everyone can do whatever the heck they want. But they also are seeing maybe some of the ramifications that it's having on their health. How did you learn to balance those things? And perhaps you're still learning it yourself.
Yeah, I do think that I am still always learning. I don't think there's a part in life where you're ever not learning something. But yeah, I think, and to be fair, I loved the career that I was in before this. I did, very much enjoy what I was doing. But it was very, very emotionally and physically tolling. And, when you're trying to work on, your nervous system and stress levels and, sleep, when you are working very long hours and you're not given that opportunity to, help yourself, that becomes a problem. So, sometimes this does come with a very hard decision on, yes, I love what I do, but at what cost, is this taking on me? So I think, a word of advice would be, even though you feel stuck in something, there are options. There are always options there. You just have to, I guess, feel okay and feel comfortable with giving yourself permission, I guess I want to say, with seeing the options, and that knowing that this is your life, this is your story, this is your journey. Don't let other people write that for you, or just because someone is telling you, that you have to do something this or that way, if that doesn't align with you, you have to really kind of like look inward and reflect inward and start listening to that voice instead.
Fair enough. Thanks for that was an impressive summarized version of that answer, because I feel like that's a whole podcast in and of itself.
Yeah, I think so.
So thank you for that, Olivia. Where can people find you if they would like to work with you and they are desperately needing some help with this and they're like, this is my girl?
Yeah, so I am pretty much just on my one platform on Instagram at live.functional. So that is pretty much where I am on the daily, where I do all of my communication, with people that are interested in working with me. So I would just jump right to that page. That's probably where you're going to get the fastest response.
Awesome. And if you're listening to this, on the audio side, we will have the links there for you. Remember, this upcoming Saturday, if you're watching live or on video, so that is August 2nd, we have our Health Space Unmasked with Dr. Lori Rose. So if you want to see, and I've called her this to her face before, so this is meant in the nicest way. If you want to see a brilliant hippie that looks like she's straight out of like the forest of Oregon because of how much she loves her herbs, teach you about herbs, then you got to get on this. So that's fdntraining.com/HSU live, fdntraining.com/HSU live. And I'd be remiss to not shout this out. If you are someone that maybe has already been through something like this, similar to Olivia, and you're looking to become like Olivia when you grow up, you're like, I want to do what she does, you can always book in with our team directly at fdntraining.com/call. That would be for people who, again, want to become a practitioner. So if you're looking to do this work faster and sooner rather than later, I would highly recommend working with Olivia. Even if you're someone that is currently dealing with these issues of infertility, quite frankly, I would not recommend taking on a whole course right now. Yes, you'll get to do the labs. Yes, that's awesome, but you got to go through the whole course to even get those results. So this time in your life, I think you need to do what she just said. Honor yourself, and we need to delegate our time properly. That's when you'd go work with a practitioner, and you could happily become an FDN afterwards. So Olivia, signature question on the show, and this could be about fertility or infertility rather, or it could just be about general health. It's however you want to interpret it. But the signature question is, if we could give you a magic wand, you could wave it, and you could get all of our viewers and listeners to do just one thing for their health. What's that one thing that you'd get us to do?
Oh my goodness. This is such a, okay. Well, I mean, there's so many, little things that you could do. I would say for hormones specifically and for women specifically, please eat your breakfast before you have coffee. So many women will wake up, not like they'll skip their breakfast and then they'll have just a coffee. Like, please do your hormones a favor. Eat a protein-rich breakfast, a savory breakfast, not a sweet breakfast, and then have your coffee later.
I think that is advice that probably 90+% of the population could take. Now, whether or not they listen is a different story, but hopefully they do take it seriously. Olivia, thank you so much for what you're doing. Thanks for sharing your story. These are ones, I love anyone that gets on here and shares their health story, but I think this is wildly important. It's one thing if someone's an adult and has a decision to not have kids. Again, I'm one of those people, that's fine. But for those out there that want to experience something that's so essential to our existence and it's not happening because of the toxins and all this crap in today's world, I think it's like literally one of the coolest things to be going out there and supporting people with that. So thank you. And I hope that you guys at least shoot her a follow. You don't have to even want to do this work with her to support people that are in this space. Every little follow, every little comment helps this get out to people who do need to hear this.